Long ago in the ancient city of Ur, located in what is today southern Iraq near the city of Nasiriyah, a child named Ibrahim was born. This was around 1800 BCE, and Ur was a city drenched in the worship of many gods. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the streets were lined with statues of lifeless idols, carved from cold stone and clay, worshipped as divine beings. Even Ibrahim's own father sculpted these figures, selling them in the bustling marketplace for others to bow before. But Ibrahim was different. From the earliest moments of his life, he felt the emptiness of the stone figures that surrounded him. While others bowed to these lifeless objects, he sensed a deeper truth stirring within his soul. He knew, deep in his heart, that these idols held no power. They were mere objects without the ability to hear, see, or help. This truth grew stronger with time until he could no longer remain silent. With courage burning inside him, he stood before his people and spoke, urging them to abandon their false gods and sinful ways. Turn to the one true God, he called, Allah, who created the heavens and the earth. But his message was met with scorn. His people, stubborn in their old ways, mocked and rejected him. They refused to let go of the comfort of their idols, and the hostility toward Ibrahim grew fierce. The city that had once been his home became a place of danger, forcing Ibrahim to leave behind everything he had known. With his loyal nephew Lut by his side, who too would become a prophet, Ibrahim set out on a journey, leaving his past behind, trusting only in the guidance of Allah. Their path led them south, and after many miles of travel, they reached the fertile lands of Canaan, the place we know today as Palestine. Ibrahim found peace here, building a new life, while his nephew Lut was sent on a divine mission to warn the sinful cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, which lay along the Jordan River, just north of the Dead Sea. During this time, a new chapter unfolded in Ibrahim's life. His second wife Hajar gave birth to a son named Ismaeel, but Allah had more plans for this family, plans that would lead them into the heart of the barren, unforgiving desert of the Arabian Peninsula. Ibrahim, with faith that did not waver, was commanded to leave Hajar and their newborn son in this desolate land, far from any town or village. Alone in the vast emptiness, Hajar's strength was tested. In her desperation, she ran between the mountains of Safa and Marwa, searching for water, for someone to help, as the hot wind whipped across the sands. Then a miracle unfolded. Beneath the feet of her infant son, Ismaeel, the earth opened up, and a spring of water began to flow. This spring, known as Zamzam, became the life source that would transform this harsh desert into what would one day become the city of Mecca. Years passed, and when Ismaeel grew into a young man, Ibrahim returned to this sacred place. Together, father and son, with their hands and hearts united, built the Kaaba, the house of Allah, calling people from all corners of the earth to make pilgrimage to it. But Ibrahim's trials were not over. In the final and greatest test of his faith, Allah commanded Ibrahim to sacrifice his beloved son Ismaeel. Though the command weighed heavily on both of them, neither wavered. With hearts full of trust in Allah's wisdom, they prepared to carry out the sacrifice. But at the last moment, Allah, in His mercy, replaced Ismaeel with a ram, sparing his life and establishing the tradition of sacrifice that continues during Hajj to this day. With his faith proven once again, Ibrahim returned to Canaan, where another blessing awaited him. His first wife, Sarah, gave birth to a son named Ishaq. This child, destined for greatness, would one day have a son of his own named Yaqub, and it was through Yaqub, also known as Israel, that the lineage of Bani Israel began to take shape. Yaqub had 12 sons, each destined to become the father of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. But as brothers often do, they did not always live in peace. 10 of the brothers were consumed by envy, believing their father loved their younger brother Yusuf more than any of them. This jealousy grew into a dark plot to rid themselves of him. With hearts heavy with betrayal, they lured Yusuf far from home and abandoned him in a well, leaving him to die. But destiny had other plans. A passing caravan found Yusuf, saving him and taking him to Egypt. There, he was sold into slavery and ended up in the household of a high-ranking Egyptian official. Yusuf's time in Egypt was filled with trials, but he remained steadfast in his faith. He grew into a young man of great wisdom and integrity, learning the intricacies of the royal court. But yet another test awaited him. The official's wife, captivated by Yusuf's beauty, tried to seduce him. Yusuf, a man of honor, resisted her advances, but the scandal spread. To silence the rumors, Yusuf was thrown into prison, where he languished for years, forgotten by the world. Even in the darkness of the dungeon, Yusuf's light never dimmed. His gift for interpreting dreams, a blessing from Allah, would eventually set him free. When the king of Egypt was troubled by a dream no one could explain, Yusuf was called upon. His wisdom and honesty were recognized, and the king raised him to a position of great power, entrusting him with the task of guiding Egypt through an impending famine. As the famine swept across the land, affecting not only Egypt but also Canaan, people from all over traveled to Egypt in search of food. Among them were Yusuf's brothers, unaware that the brother they had betrayed now stood in a position of authority. When they came before him, they did not recognize him, but Yusuf knew exactly who they were. Instead of seeking revenge, he forgave them, revealing his identity and embracing them with love. He invited them to bring their father Yaqub and their families to Egypt, where they could live in peace and prosperity. And so Bani Israel settled in Egypt, living under the rule of the Hyksos, foreign rulers who had conquered the land. But this time of peace did not last forever. By the 1500s BCE, the tides of power shifted once again. The native Egyptians, led by Pharaoh Mose I, drove out the Hyksos and reclaimed their kingdom, beginning what is known as the New Kingdom period. Under the rule of the pharaohs, the fate of Bani Israel changed drastically. No longer favoured, they were enslaved and subjected to brutal oppression. Their sons were slaughtered, their daughters suffered unimaginable horrors, and the weight of tyranny pressed down on them for generations. Yet, even in this darkness, Allah's plan unfolded. It was during this time that a baby boy named Musa was born. Fearing for his life under Pharaoh's decree to kill all newborn boys, Musa's mother placed her infant son in a basket and set him adrift on the Nile, trusting in Allah's protection. The river carried Musa to none other than the house of Pharaoh himself, where he was found and adopted by Asiya, the Pharaoh's pious and kind-hearted wife. Musa grew up in the palace, surrounded by luxury and power, yet his heart was always with his people. One day, while walking through the streets, he witnessed an Egyptian beating one of his own people. In a moment of anger and defense, Musa struck the Egyptian, accidentally killing him. Fearing retribution, Musa fled Egypt, leaving behind the life he had known. His journey took him east to the land of Midian, where he found refuge with the prophet Shu'ayb. There, Musa worked for many years and married Shu'ayb's daughter. After fulfilling his duties, Musa set out with his family, travelling back towards Sinai. It was in the valley of Tuwa, by the sacred Mount Sinai, that Allah revealed himself to Musa, calling him to a great mission that would change the course of history. Allah commanded Musa, along with his brother Harun, to confront Pharaoh and demand the release of Bani Israel from their chains of slavery. And so began the great confrontation between Musa and Pharaoh, a battle not of swords, but of faith and miracles. Musa stood before Pharaoh, his heart filled with unwavering belief, performing miracles that could only come from Allah. But Pharaoh, blinded by his arrogance, refused to believe, and the suffering of Bani Israel deepened. At last, the time for mercy passed. Under the cover of night, Musa led his people toward the Red Sea, Pharaoh's army close behind. As they stood on the shores, trapped between the sea and the approaching soldiers, fear gripped the hearts of Bani Israel. But Musa, guided by Allah, struck the waters with his staff, and the sea split in two, towering walls of water creating a path of escape. The people hurried through, their footsteps echoing on the dry seabed. But as Pharaoh's army followed, the waters crashed down, swallowing them whole. The sea, once an obstacle, became the grave of the oppressors. With their freedom won, Bani Israel journeyed into the wilderness. But freedom came with responsibility. At the foot of Mount Sinai, they stood in awe as the mountain loomed above them, a symbol of their covenant with Allah. They swore to follow the teachings revealed to Musa and Harun, to worship none but Allah, and to live righteously. Musa led them toward the land of Canaan, where they were commanded to capture the city of Jerusalem. But fear overtook them, and all but 2 men, Caleb and Yusuf, refused to fight. Because of their hesitation, they wandered the desert for many more years. Eventually, Musa passed away, and Yusuf took up the mantle of leadership, leading the new generation of Bani Israel into battle. They conquered Canaan and established the 12 kingdoms of Israel around 1400 BCE. For several hundred years, Bani Israel thrived, but disunity crept in. The tribes sought a king to unite them, and their prophet Samuel appointed Saul as the first king of a united Israel around 1050 BCE. Under his rule, the kingdom waged war against the Amalekites, a fierce nation led by the giant Goliath. In the midst of battle, a young shepherd named Dawood stepped forward, armed with nothing but a slingshot and unwavering faith. With a single stone, Dawood brought Goliath down, marking the beginning of his rise to kingship. Dawood would later be given prophethood, and under his leadership, Israel flourished like never before. Dawood was known for his piety, wisdom and strength, both in battle and in matters of justice. He was a warrior but also a man of peace, guided by the Zabur, the divine scripture revealed to him by Allah. He was even taught the craft of metalwork, forging armor that made him an unstoppable force. When Dawood's time came to an end, his son Sulayman inherited the throne. But Sulayman's reign was unlike any other. He was granted power over the very forces of nature. Animals and jinn obeyed his command. Under his blessed rule, the first temple, a magnificent masjid, was built. It became the center of worship for Bani Israel, a place where their prayers rose toward the heavens. But Sulayman's reign could not last forever. After his death, the kingdom fractured, and by the 900 BCE, Israel was split into 2, the kingdom of Israel in the north and the kingdom of Judah in the south. The northern kingdom strayed far from the path of righteousness, turning to idols like Baal, breaking their covenant with Allah. In response, Allah sent the prophet Ilyas to remind them of their promise. Ilyas preached tirelessly, calling the people back to the worship of Allah alone. But even after his passing, the hearts of many remained hardened. Destruction was on the horizon for the northern kingdom. By the 700 BCE, the Assyrian Empire swept across the Levant, conquering Israel in 720 BCE. A large portion of the population was exiled to distant lands, never to return, becoming known as the lost tribes of Israel. Those who remained lived under the harsh rule of their conquerors. Meanwhile, the kingdom of Judah remained steadfast in their worship of Allah. But even Judah could not escape its fate. From the east, a new empire rose. Under the command of King Nebuchadnezzar II, the Neo-Babylonian Empire swept across the region, defeating the Assyrians and turning its gaze toward Judah. In 586 BCE, the Babylonians invaded, capturing the kingdom, and in a devastating blow, they destroyed the Temple of Sulayman, the sacred heart of Bani Israel's worship. The people of Judah were taken from their homes, exiled to Babylon as captives. It was a time of great sorrow and loss. The temple reduced to rubble, and the people of Bani Israel scattered far from the land that had once been promised to them. Yet, even in captivity, hope flickered. In 539 BCE, a righteous king rose in Persia, Cyrus the Great. Known for his justice and mercy, Cyrus conquered Babylon without bloodshed. He led his armies to the mighty city of Babylon, the heart of the empire that had enslaved Bani Israel. But when he arrived, Babylon did not resist. Without a single battle, Cyrus entered the city as its new ruler. One of his first acts was to free Bani Israel from their bondage, allowing them to return to Judea and rebuild the Temple of Sulayman. The exiles returned, filled with hope, and began the long process of restoration. For the next 200 years, Judea remained part of the Persian Empire, living under its rule, but with a degree of freedom and faith. However, history would once again bring new conquerors. In 332 BCE, the armies of Alexander the Great swept through the region, and Judea fell into the hands of foreign empires once more. This cycle of domination continued, with various powers controlling the land until the rise of the Roman Empire. The Romans extended their reach across the Mediterranean, and by 63 BCE, they had sacked Jerusalem, making Judea a client state of their vast empire. Under Roman rule, Bani Israel faced yet another challenge to their faith and identity. It was during this time that the final prophets were sent to Bani Israel. The prophet Zakariya held a significant role in Jerusalem, overseeing the sacred affairs of the temple. He was also the guardian of a young girl, Maryam, after her father had passed away. Zakariya, now an old man, prayed earnestly to Allah for a son to inherit his prophetic legacy. His prayers were answered, and he was blessed with a wise and righteous son named Yahya, John the Baptist. These two prophets paved the way for one of the most extraordinary figures in history, Isa, the son of Maryam. Born to the Virgin Maryam, Isa's birth was a miracle, a sign from Allah. Together, Isa and the prophets before him called upon their people to renew their covenant with Allah, to worship Him alone, and to live according to the divine laws of the scriptures. But not all within Bani Israel accepted this message. Many of the rulers, although they were from Bani Israel, had submitted to Roman authority, oppressing their own people. Among these rulers was Herod the Great, who, according to biblical accounts, ordered the massacre of all boys in Bethlehem under the age of 2. This was during the time of Isa's birth, as rumours had spread of a miraculous child who spoke from the cradle, a child who was foretold to be the long-awaited Messiah. It is said that the prophet Zakariya was killed for refusing to reveal the whereabouts of this child. After the death of Herod, his son inherited the throne. He later ordered Yahya's execution. His life was taken in the most brutal way. With the death of Yahya, Isa, the final prophet sent to Bani Israel, was left to face the challenges ahead on his own. The authorities, already threatened by his growing following, turned their attention to him. Soon, rumours began to spread, claiming that Isa had been crucified and later resurrected. However, the truth was very different. Isa was neither killed nor crucified. It only appeared that way, as Allah had saved him and raised him up to keep him safe until the time of his return to earth. This moment marked a pivotal shift in history. It was the beginning of a division between those who would go on to call themselves Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The Jews, on one hand, rejected Isa, claiming he was not the promised Messiah. Christians, following the teachings of Paul and his followers, believed that Isa had been crucified, resurrected, and that he was the Son of Allah. However, the Muslims understood Isa as a prophet, just like those who came before him. They believed that Isa was neither crucified nor the Son of Allah, and that he did not die for the sins of humanity. Instead, he would return in the future to fulfill his role as the true Messiah. Muslims saw Isa as part of a greater prophecy, one mentioned in the book of Isaiah chapter 42, which speaks of a coming prophet from the desert lands of Kedar, descendants of Ismaeel. This prophet would stand against the worship of idols and bring justice to the world. Muslims believe that this prophecy points to Muhammad, peace be upon him, the final messenger of Allah, who would come to complete the message of all the prophets before him. This then is the story of Bani Israel, a story that extends far beyond their own time. It is also the story of the Muslims, who see themselves as the spiritual successors to the covenant that was made with Allah. Among Bani Israel, there were those who shined as beacons of faith and others who stumbled into darkness. They had moments of unity and triumph and times of division and downfall, but in their history, we find a reflection of our own struggles and mistakes. Their journey is our journey. Their legacy is our legacy. The Muslims are the heirs to the teachings of the prophets, sworn to worship none but Allah and to uphold the scriptures that have been passed down through the ages. And so the history and legacy of Bani Israel belong to those who continue to follow the path of Muhammad, the final prophet. the seal of the messengers.